In 2019, Lou Costa of Ironmill partnered with Manlihood on a blog campaign entitled Rise Up. We wrote weekly blog posts exploring manhood and calling men to step into more. We shot a handful of videos to go along with our posts, but we never used them. In June of 2021, Lou passed away unexpectedly. It was a shock to not only his biological family, but to his family that he built around him as well. After he died, I dug out the unused footage that we shot. It was raw, powerful, and I think it deserves to be a part of Lou's legacy. Someday, Lou's sons are going to Google his name, and I want them to be able to see his face, to hear his voice, and to see into his mind and his heart. These episodes are dedicated to my friend, Louis James Costa.
I'll let you lead these down the road.
I'll ask you a bunch of questions too.
Yeah,
so
that works great for me.
Okay.
The 23.
Hey guys, welcome back to Rise Up. We are glad you guys are with us. Josh Hatcher from manlihood.com, Lou Costa from
Ironmill,
and
the world.
From Bradford, which if you guys are following the stuff that we're doing, you've probably read Blue's Clues. Blue's Clues. Yeah, you've probably read Blue's Clues. You probably
Blue's Clues.
I think I want to, yeah.
Okay.
Totally putting outtakes at the end of this thing because it's hilarious.
It's a great outtake right there. You use that for the outtake.
Cut! No, so anyway, if you've been following along, you've probably seen Lou's article, Bradford Badfish, where he references some Sublime and talks about his story. And, I think it's a cool place to start. Lou, I'm not going to have you rehash it all because people can read the whole thing, but why don't you give me a quick overview? You grew up middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to go the motivation things for it. I don't want to really, yeah.
That's okay.
Ask me that question again.
Okay. So Lou, Bradford Badfish is your blog post that we posted this week. Tell me what's behind this story of yours. Where's this coming from?
Yeah, I started writing that about 3 or 4 years ago when the heroin epidemic had come through Bradford, and not just Bradford, because a lot of people complain. If you're not from Bradford, that's fine, because Bradford's like every industrial mid-sized town and everywhere, the Rust Belt in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio. We all have these towns that depended on industry and manufacturing, and when those things started to change, the culture changed a little bit in this generation, and heroin attacked a lot of these, which has gotten better now. So in the 4 years since that I started that article, and I've been writing it, sometimes, and if anybody has written, sometimes things take a while to come around, but over that course of 4 years, Badfish was written as kind of an ode to Bradford and my love for it, because I love this town. I was grown here, I was born here, and I've seen the community take on kind of a different life form of its own, and I saw a lot of apathy towards the youth, and that was the motivation for that. Me growing up as a Bradford Badfish, which was a reference to Sublime, and if you read the article, music that I have loved. But so Bradford Badfish to me was coined as a term of kids that were born of these small Rust Belt towns that were kind of left behind to a degree, without fathers, this community raised me well, but I feel like we're not doing that now,
Right.
So I wasn't left behind. The community raised me, because I wasn't, I didn't have a nuclear family, and I didn't have the thing that, the father figure, the right family signature that you would need, but the community raised me, and now those things are kind of, I don't think they're gone, but they're being left behind.
It's a lot harder for a coach or a teacher to have a good influence on somebody when he goes home and the influence at home is not as good. And I think, whereas before, like even though things might not have been perfect back then, there was at least there was the benchmark was a little higher.
Well, I don't think
it's just gradually fallen down since then, I think.
Well, I think that's everywhere, right? It's not just in Bradford.
No,
It's not dogging Bradford out. In fact, if you read the article, it's uplifting. It's a thing. It's a point of pride that I have, and something. It's a call to arms and action, because people are despondent, and I think a lot of these kids. It's not that they're growing up bad kids, and it's not that the youth is. Left behind. It's not that they're bad kids. It's that we have a responsibility as this generation to pick them up, and that's was a big part. Something for me that meant a lot to get out there and put out there the way I write things.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is in your face, which is I don't care.
No, I love it. I really related with the article because I grew up in in Rowlett, PA, which is even smaller, a lot more like where you actually lived in Rue, which is kind of like the suburbs of rural.
Yeah. Well, I can't say I grew up in Rue. Not because I'm ashamed. I'm very proud. Anybody that knows I'm a Rueite to my heart.
Sure.
Hill people. But
the Hill people, right.
When you say Bradford in the general population, no one understands. When you say Rue from the general population, no one understands. But Bradford, where I literally grew up running the streets, I grew up downtown in Bradford. So being like you said, a suburb of rural is where I actually grew up.
It's the middle of nowhere, and I think a lot of people who. Now, you know what? To be fair, people who grew up in like New York City or Harlem or Los Angeles, they probably have rough stories too. So I think there's definitely wherever you're at, wherever you grew up, wherever you're from, there's this sense of pride that kind of rises up when you think about your hometown, even though it's broken and even though it's messed up.
Well, yeah, and the real important thing to me is I don't think it was back then. I feel like when I grew up, it was me that was broken.
Okay.
Thank God the town wasn't, But it's different now, because there's a lot. Listen, there's blight. We have the heroin addiction epidemic. Meth houses are getting busted. It's not just here. Because I'm just not going to. Piling on Bradford is not something I want to do.
Right,
but we're talking about a whole generation of towns and cities and things like that.
And all of our towns have problems. And I think that we talked about in our video when we did our launch video talking about this, we talked about how men have kind of like gotten lazy and pulled back instead of taking an active role. And I think that honestly, like we're meant to lead in our families. We're meant to lead in our workplaces. We're meant to lead in our communities. And I think that what's happening is we've stopped leading. We don't know anything about leadership or what it means. And then so that doesn't mean you have to go in and be the boss. That's not what leadership means. Leadership means service.
Leadership's by example.
And responsibility.
Discipline.
So when I say
work ethic.
When I say you need to lead, I'm saying there's a neighbor kid whose dad is always working and never home. And he comes home from school and he goes inside and he plays PlayStation until his dad gets home at midnight. If his dad comes home, if he even has a dad. Who's given this kid any guidance? And I think 5 minutes at the mailbox, or handing him some cookies on his way as he's walking in the door, can at least open the door. But the problem is nobody wants to take responsibility. It's his kid. It's not my problem.
Which is why the little leagues are so important. Youth sports, the community centers. We're not just trying to bust drug houses. Theater,
music, all those things.
Music. For me, it was a heavy bag in my garage. Like even the smallest things can make a giant difference. And when I wrote Badfish, it was meant to be a call to arms for the community to step up and say, we're growing a population of addicted, apathetic, lazy, despondent kids, and we expect them to behave. We expect them to know the rules. They don't know the rules. How are they supposed to know the rules if they're not taught that way? Who's teaching them? Mm-hmm. We know the education system isn't built for teaching. It's built for PSA testing now. We know that.
Well, and even when it's built for education, it's built for education, not parenting.
Right. And talk about parenting. The daycare system now that didn't exist to the degree it did. When we were younger.
We've got people where we have both parents working, and the second job isn't making enough to pay for the daycare.
Yeah.
So why I don't understand, Well,
we've taken the onus off of the parent and put it on some system that is bankrupting the morality of our kids, I think. Is that too much to say?
No, it is.
That's too much of a reach. Someone tell me, but I see it happening. So it's
It is. I agree with you 100%. And I don't know. I think that I guess what our call is rise up.
Yeah.
Look at the kids around you. Look at the neighborhood around you. You know, if you're walking, as simple as you're walking down the street and somebody threw out a pop bottle and it's on the ground, pick it up.
Which which even more I love. Give a high five to the kid walking down the street. Oh, hey, what's up, Steve?
Yeah.
It's like, Josh, what's up, man?
Yeah.
I like your shoes, dude. You know, like, go play basketball with a kid. Tell him, ask him how his day is. Look up away from your phone. You know, don't get me started, Josh. I'm walking down our community streets and not everybody paying attention to anybody.
Yeah. Well,
I ride around the car and I'm like, hey, this used to be social media. Be like, hey, Jan, hey, well, you know, like, we don't have to post your food on social media. You just go by and say, hey, what are you cooking for dinner tonight? You know, and not that you have to do that, but I'm saying that's what people forget. That's what community used to be. I grew up on my bike actually talking to people.
Right. Yeah. Well, I remember a few years ago I went to New York City and we stayed outside the city, rode the commuter train in, and it was the most bizarre thing for a kid that grew up in Rowlett to be riding a train into New York City with hundreds of people who don't talk to each other. They ride on the same. We actually started conversations because it was so quiet. I'm like, well, there's all these people and nobody's talking. So I'm like, do you ride this bus? You ride this train every day? Oh yeah. You usually pick the same car? Do you know all of these other people? Oh, I see them.
Yeah.
They see these people every day, and we have people in the cities who are committing suicide because they feel lonely. They're in the biggest city in the world, and they're surrounded by people, and nobody talks. And the same thing is happening all over now. We're so connected with our phones, and we're so connected with social media, and we're so connected to some famous actress on TV, and we don't know anything about the people across the street.
Yeah. We find more self-worth in the way we look on Facebook than we do about watching our kids.
Yeah, our dog filters, our puppy filters, and...
Which we make this joke all the time. Which dating in your 30s is a trap. But I don't understand, like, the filters on women. Like, women just like looking at themselves like cats. I don't get it. Everybody's like, hey, look at me, I'm a pretty cat. And I'm like, I'm not making fun of women by any means, because men have their own thing. But I don't understand. Well, not only that, I do understand. I know exactly that's not true. I know exactly why. Because there are a certain amount of engineers that are hired from MIT, from Harvard, from the places out there to make sure you don't understand that that's what you're addicted to now. Those things actually happen.
Right. Because you talked about all that addiction, all those drugs. Dude, they've already put electrodes on people's brains and sat there and observed the chemical reactions and the electro reactions that are happening when they're scrolling and they're getting a like and they're getting comments. And it's the same neurochemicals in the brain that are released when they're doing drugs.
And casinos.
There's
a definite mechanism that's unlocked.
And spending your credit card instead of cash. That's another place where there's the same, you know.
And I'm not judging because, listen, for the longest time, I mean, I was the same way. And I remember the first time I said, I want to try this, and I put down my phone, I had to pick it back up. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what to do. I literally was like, I mean, I was getting to the point, I think the average is 175 times a day, people are staring at their phones.
Yeah.
And what's the cost of that? What's the cost of your attention span 175 times a day being taken off whatever you're doing?
I'm going to tell you right now, I do it way too much.
Loneliness, depression,
I do it way too much. It does, yeah. And it does affect you. And so, like I said, I want to try to use it to reach out to people. Chances are good some of you guys are watching this on a phone right now or watching this on social media. Great. Then let's take it back and rise up and let's use it for good. But let's also shut it off. And what's the word they use to describe when a husband and wife are laying in bed next to each other and they're just scrolling mindlessly through Facebook? They call it fubbing.
What?
Fubbing.
What's it called? Fubbing?
Fubbing. I don't know what it means. It's probably dirty, but it just means that they're spending time on their phone next to each other instead of actually talking to each other.
And what are their kids doing?
Their kids are doing it in the other room. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, man, like, we used to watch television shows together.
Yeah.
Because when we had Hulu and Netflix, and you could put it on one device, which meant we would all sit down and we had shows that we would watch together. Well, now you got it on all the devices, and so now the whole family has just kind of started to have their own tastes develop. Used to be we all liked the same show. Now I sit there and my wife is watching the Great British Baking Show, and I'm like, what is this crap? And then I start watching, something on, like a sci-fi kind of show, or, start watching Twin Peaks, something like mystery or action, and she's like, what is this? And the whole family now has started to splinter in different directions, and that's not...
Well, and the dark art of that, too, is something I referenced as, when Playboy went out of business, and Playboy, this was 3 or 4 years ago when I wrote it. I forget now the guy's the editor of Playboy, but he said when they finally decided to they took all nudity out of Playboy. He referenced his quote was, "When any sex act is available at the click of one, at the availability of one click, everything is passe. Now, nothing matters." And so, if everybody's in their separate rooms watching the screens, what's your 11-year-old doing? What's the dad doing? I think, I'm not saying everyone's addicted to porn, but I'm saying it's a giant problem now, and for what that does to a generation of sexuality,
it does, because we could talk about this all day,
right?
And I know I've been in that spot. I almost lost my marriage a couple of times because I was involved in that, and it took me a wrong direction. And I'm not saying this as a Christian who has preconceived notions. I'm just saying it kills your sex drive. It exploits women. And you know what else? It's never satisfied. That's the thing. So I just shared an article the other day about the number of children being sold into sexual slavery. People buying child prostitutes, and the numbers are ridiculous. I'm not saying that every guy that looks at porn is going to do that. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, when we make it available like that, we desensitize ourselves, and we now treat sexuality, instead of as something special that's meant to be shared in a certain context, it's just, it's like taking a crap. It's just a biological function. Being
marketers, I understand that we are, and when you're a marketer and you're advertising to the mass public, it's a persuasion of a mass public. From just our little town of Bradford to Olean, what is every other billboard? Addiction, heroin, HIV, sex slavery. There's literally warnings now. Call this if you see that going on.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's the
what the hell? I mean, what the hell?
Then there's the sex shop that's trying to sell you the sex toys.
Right.
We're behind that, but
yeah. But I'm saying, so if somebody's spending $800 a month, that doesn't mean it's a friggin' problem.
Yeah, $800 a month to say if you see someone that's in sexual slavery, stop it. Really? That must mean it's a big problem.
It's frightening. It's not sounding the alarm, but I guess that's kind of when we wanted to write this and we started, and I said, listen, I want to write some real things and talk about some real things. If that's too much to stomach for you, that you can't handle the idea of sex slavery or sex addiction, which is hiring Christians, why is that?
Because there's shame, man. It's
right.
Because nobody will talk about it. Nobody will say, I am struggling with porn. Nobody wants to say that, because if they say that, then, you're not holy. And then you don't get help. Shame is a killer, dude. Like I'm not saying you shouldn't regret things that you do wrong. And listen, shame actually has a place. You know what I mean? Like there are people that aren't ashamed of things, and they should be ashamed of things. You know what I mean? Maybe shame would keep you from doing it, but shame can also keep you in this spot. And it's the same with alcohol. It's the same with drugs. It's the same with violence. Like nobody's ever going to tell you, dude, I'm beating my wife. Nobody's ever going to tell you that, because they don't want you to know that. Because if somebody tells me that, I'm going to break his nose.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Shame and anger kind of go hand in hand.
It does. It just builds this cycle, and then you stay in it. And, I don't know. I think that as men, we have to be able to rise above that. We have to rise
up! Iron sharpens iron. So listen, we want you to go out, check the articles out. You wrote a fantastic article on resurrection.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Where'd the motivation for that come from?
Okay, so, it's funny, because a lot of this stuff was actually written around Easter, that's what Easter is about. And, one of the things, we're talking about rise up, the picture that jumps into my head is this idea of a person laying in a grave, rotten, and life coming back into his bones, and just standing up and walking out and taking his life back. And Henry David Thoreau talked about men living lives of quiet desperation, and I see it all around me. I see men who are dead. I know that there was a time in my life when I was dead, and I don't want to be dead. I want to be alive.
Yeah,
that's the concept. Let's do it. Let's stop being dead.
Well, it's not just stop being dead. I mean, it's exactly that for a lot of people. It's something that, but it's finding the motivation. It's finding the pattern and the thought process, the want, and the people to share that with. It is a little bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. Like you said, porn addiction. I'm kind of a booze hound. And that's okay. But so you go to an AA meeting and you sit there with somebody, and you're like, the fact that we're sharing this together is a bond, and that's a momentum, and it is a rise fist up out of the grave.
Yeah.
Now I have some momentum. Now I have an idea that I'm not just in this alone. And I feel like, isn't that just how it's suffered? No matter what it is, no matter what we all go through as men, and this isn't just therapy hour where we get to share our deepest, darkest secrets. It's literally, I want to make sure that this message is put down where you get something out of it and change and rise up.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, I'm not doing this for my health. Like, I want you guys to seriously sit there and feel something inside of you and say, you know what, man? I'm going to go out there and play with old Billy on the basketball court. I don't mean play with Billy the wrong way. I mean play with them basketball.
Shoot some
people.
hoops.
Stop touching kids, man. Like, what the hell?
Yeah,
you know, like,
we're talking about death and destruction. Dude, like, all around us, man.
Yeah.
Like
we're
it's all
making billboards for it. It's a problem. Heroin addiction. I mean, sex addiction. The casinos. You got a gambling problem? How many of those have? It's right next to the casino. Those gambling signs are 10 minutes from the casino.
I know, and that's the thing. Like, and we're not here to be prudes, and we're not here to tell you what you should and shouldn't do, or say, oh, you're not the church lady. You know, you're old enough. You should know the church lady, right? Dana Carvey.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, aren't you special? We're not here to do that. We're not saying that. What we're saying is, look, like, we've abandoned any sense of common morality in our culture, and we've got to do something about it. I think we need to rise up and say, what you're doing, brother, isn't right. So straighten up.
The best friend you can be to somebody, and I have a lot of strained relations with people because I feel like when I'm a good friend, it's because I say something that's hard to say. And if you are my friend, you know that to be true.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And it's not because I'm righteous. Anybody that is my good friend knows I can say the same thing back to me.
Right, and people have said them to us and said, dude, you're wrong. And that's one of the themes actually through this whole 12 weeks is the brotherhood. You cannot do this alone. So if you want to rise up out of the grave, look, here's the hand, grab the hand, we will help pull you out. And I'm not saying Lou and I'm saying all of us. Like,
together.
You're not alone. You don't have to be alone. So stop living in the shame thinking nobody wants to touch me. Dude, if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or you're living a life, even if you're not doing something you should be doing, you're sitting on the couch doing nothing, let's rise up together. Let's do it.
You can't say anything else about it.
I think that's it, man.
We just want to rise up!
Dude,
a lot of that's really good.
I think it really is.
Some of it definitely had
A lot of it.